So if you're aiming to be a leader in public administration, maybe even run a city one day, I've got a question for you. What's the plan when your city's digital front door gets kicked in? Today, we're digging into a really important study that asks whether our local governments are actually ready for the very real threat of cyber attacks.
And all of this comes from a fantastic piece of research in the Journal of Cyber Policy. It's a 2020 study where the authors, Hatcher, Mears, and Heslin, actually went out and surveyed 168 city officials across the U.S. to get a real look at their cybersecurity policies and, what they're actually doing. Which brings us right to the heart of it, the big question they wanted to answer, and frankly, the one we should all be asking. Are America's cities ready for a major cyber attack? And believe me, this is not some far-off theoretical problem.
I mean, just look at what happened in Atlanta. Back in 2018, a ransomware attack basically brought the city government to its knees. And we're not just talking about an IT headache. This was a complete breakdown of public services that affected thousands of people's daily lives.
All right, so here's the game plan for how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the threat itself. Then we'll get into why this research was so badly needed. After that, we'll dive into the survey results, compare cities that have policies with those that don't, and wrap it all up with a playbook for you, the public leaders of today and tomorrow.
So first things first, let's get a handle on the real-world consequences when a city's digital walls come tumbling down.
The Atlanta attack wasn't some abstract data breach. For more than a week, police officers couldn't pull up certain records. People couldn't apply for jobs with the city. You couldn't even go online to pay your water bill. This is exactly what happens when cybersecurity fails on a local level. It hits people right where they live.
Okay, so if the threat is so obvious, why did we even need this study? Well, it turns out there was a huge blind spot in our understanding of what cities were actually doing to protect themselves.
And to really get what's at risk, we have to talk about e-government. It's a simple idea, cities using the internet to do business. It all started with stage one, basic websites with information. But now, most cities are deep into stage two, handling things like online bill payments. That means they're collecting and storing all kinds of sensitive personal and financial data, which just raises the stakes sky high.
And here it is, the core problem that the researcher saw. This quote really says it all. There was almost no hard data on how cities were protecting all this citizen information. Everyone knew the threat was getting worse, but it seems like nobody had really gone out and asked, so what's the plan?
And that brings us to the real heart of this research, that survey of 168 city officials. Let's take a look at what they uncovered.
Now, at first glance, this number looks pretty decent, 71%. A big majority of cities said, yep, we have a formal written cybersecurity policy. And that's a great start, right? Well, maybe. See, having a policy is one thing, but putting it into practice, that's a whole other story.
And this is where it gets really telling. This chart shows the huge gap between policy and practice. I mean, look, almost everybody, 96%, is doing the easy stuff, like physically locking up their servers. That's a no-brainer. But then look at the numbers for the more proactive, smarter practices. Only 37% are actually keeping a detailed log of cyber attacks, and just 35% are having their policies reviewed by an outside expert each year. That's the gap we're talking about, the difference between having a policy on paper and actually living it.
So this begs a really important question. Does having that formal policy actually make a difference in the real world? Well, the study looked into this, comparing the cities that had a formal policy to those that didn't, and the results are pretty stark.
The key takeaway here is that a formal policy is way more than just a piece of paper. This table makes it crystal clear. Cities with a written policy were much more likely to do all the important stuff. Run vulnerability scans, encrypt sensitive data, log attacks, and, this is a big one, train their employees. So that policy document, it's not just sitting on a shelf, it's a catalyst. It creates a framework that actually drives better security behavior.
Okay, so this brings us to the final and I think most important part, the playbook. For all of you watching who are current or future public leaders, what can you actually do with this information?
The study gives us 3 core recommendations, and they are brilliant. First, track your data. You can't fight an enemy you don't understand. Second, get an outside view. An expert auditor will see things your internal team might miss. And third, and this is so important, make cybersecurity a management function, not just an IT problem. It has to be woven into your daily operations and training.
Now, zooming out to the big picture, the study points to 3 major policy ideas. 1, collaboration. Smaller towns can team up to share costs and get access to top-notch experts. 2, we need more federal funding to help local governments build up their defenses.
And 3, and this one is for all the students out there, Master of Public Administration programs have got to make IT and cybersecurity a core part of what they teach. The next generation of city managers has to graduate with the skill set.
So we'll leave you with this. Knowing that there's a gap between what we say we'll do and what we actually do is step 1. The real challenge is closing that gap. So for those of you heading into public service, the question isn't just, will my city have a policy? It's, how will I lead the effort to make sure that policy is a living, breathing thing that actually protects my community?